I'm not gonna lie, I actually think I like episode 2 more than the first episode, and I mean, the first episode had me instantly hooked, but the thing with episode 2 is it gives you a more clear picture on where the show clearly wants to go from here, getting more understanding about how, like, clearly the church isn't okay with the number of people being summoned from the royalty there. I mean, the king literally is getting executed because of this. And the idea that, I mean, from the first episode, they show us at one point in Menou's childhood, a summon literally destroyed everything around them. So they very much fear what the abilities can do, so they take him out before they can cause any harm. Or they, apparently, as it's stated in the episode, whether you believe it or not, is obviously, I mean, there's always skepticism, a church saying one thing but secretly doing another. They may not actually lose their minds, but apparently the more you use an ability, the more corrupted your mind can become. I mean, Menou herself won't even use poison on someone who apparently cannot die, mainly because if you kill her, time reverses from before she was attacked, so you don't want to corrupt the mind of someone who can literally tamper with time. So it's interesting to see how they kind of I almost feel like cover their tracks so early. So it's very easy to see why certain sections of the world are doing one thing, but then apparently the top bosses, which is the church, if we go off of episode 1, is clearly doing another. Of course, there's definitely skepticism on whether the church is lying. Maybe they're telling the complete truth, but maybe they're just so clouded in fear they don't realize that eventually there's going to be a threat that you actually need the summons in order to basically save your world. Or maybe they're just completely evil scumbags. You don't quite know, because really anime can do super twists and turns and things like that, or they can go with a more cliche plotline but refine it so much that it doesn't feel generic. And the idea of having someone like Akari, who is very bubbly, very giddy, pretty typical normal high school moe blob anime girl personality, if I'm being honest. And the idea of the Yuri undertones, I mean, we got it last week with her one friend there. We got it even more so in this week. I mean, she pretty much immediately kicks it off being like, hey, we're going to go on an adventure. I wonder what feelings could develop. And I love that because you have someone like Menou who's very almost cool, calm, and collected, but is clearly going to have doubts the longer she journeys. Apparently, it's a day-and-a-half trip, or actually, I think it's a half-day trip, something like that by train. The idea that it's only going to take a few days to get her to the chapel, and then they're going to kill her. I mean, the emphasis was put on in terms of the lie that she'd be sent home. Clearly doesn't want to be sent home, so I'm curious if maybe she'll run away and that's how the trip will be prolonged, or if they're going to use the princess, who's on the same train, as a way to prolong that journey. Either way, you know what's going to happen in terms of she's going to develop feelings, whether that's friendship or romantic. I mean, clearly she has two girls around her who are already thirsting on her. It's just a matter of, does she thirst for them, or is it going to be more friendship, family, or whatever? I mean, in typical anime fashion, the main character pushes away all the romance, the harem building, so maybe that's the direction they'll go. Either way, she's going to start caring for her as a person, and then there's going to come a point where she's going to have to make a decision. Tell her the truth, potentially destroying whatever connection they have at that moment, or does she go to the church and then basically have to say goodbye? Either way, she ain't dying by episode 12. It's most likely that's going to be the main kind of story hook, unless they want to throw another twist and turn. Either way, it was pretty clear after the kind of silhouette we saw in her dream, or whatever that was in the first episode, we get a taste of it in this episode as well, that it was going to be Akari. So therefore, there's something going on in terms of her internal psyche, and I'm really excited to see what they do. And that's what makes this episode so good, is that they just really put the emphasis. They continue to explain why they're killing these summons, why there's different sections who are trying to summon them. Most likely they want to use their power to retain their power, or they believe there's going to be a shield hero route where there's shit that we need them to defeat. Either way, I like how they really explain things while continuing to put an emphasis on the world and lore development. I mean, right away you see her use, once again, magic in a pretty creative way. She adds this crest to her knife, and then a thread's attached to it, so she can almost use it like a grapple hook. Super cool to see how they continue to make magic way more cool than a lot of anime, because, I mean, I do think in recent times, I think the way studios portray magic has gotten better, but there are so many times that if you're going to have magic, you either enhance your blade or you shoot a projectile. That's the two things a lot of studios will do. And the fact that we have this interesting use of crests in these books and these scriptures, it's just so cool to see how it lends to a lot more creative freedom, especially for the animators and how they're portraying it. Or the idea of a locomotive, right? A train. So clearly it's a more medieval fantasy-like setting, or they use like this magic in terms of like fueling their train. So instead of using coal or fuel and things like that, you just get a sense of you can have more modern ideas but fueled by magic in an almost medieval fantasy setting. And I love that type of stuff, whether it's kind of like grimdark fantasy, whether it's something like a Victorian era, but they have like a steampunk vibe to it, and they have something like magic or this insane technology we clearly don't have in our own world, but it allows them to have similar technology that we have. I love that type of stuff, and I think it goes a long way to developing a world without having a character sit there and overly explain what's going on, because visually we can tell what's going on with a quick snippet from a character here and there. I think there's going to be some interesting rivalry. I mean, you don't have the name Boobalicious come out without knowing that there's probably going to be some attempted assassinations from this girl. But I think in terms of a hook, having someone, kicking off the first episode with killing someone who a lot of people thought was going to be the generic main character, and then ends up just dying, and then you have a second character who, I mean, it's in the synopsis, so people being shocked that she ended up surviving, that's going to happen if you knew nothing about it. But if you read the official synopsis, you knew this girl wasn't going to die, and she was going to basically give Menou a run for her money. But it's nice in terms of a story hook, rather than just kicking it off with this. We already know the type of brutality that goes on in this world with episode 1, so episode 2 just gives us a more grounded idea of where it wants to go, while just remaining to be pretty damn fun and anime all in the process. And they actually kind of spiced up the background art as well, which was pretty surprising, because there was nothing too crazy in last week's episode. There was a couple of shots, but especially like once they got into the train station there, and then you have like that hilarious scene where she's like, don't do anything that's gonna reveal your identity, and then in anime fashion, a little girl with a scrape on her hand almost gets everyone busted, so they have to do this like bubble attack, almost like a bubble beam from Pokemon. It was cool to see like how cool the world can look, especially on details like the train or just the general landscape. Like, there's so much that reminds me of our own world and our own history with different cultures and things like that, and how buildings and architecture obviously changed over time. But it's still feeling like it has that almost fantasy charm to it, or that color palette, I guess is how I'd say it. And that's what makes it such a fun show to look at, from the character wardrobes to the background art itself. It just is something that really speaks to me personally, and it just kind of sets itself apart from a lot of similar shows with a similar idea in terms of a setting, and I guess appeal is how I'd put it. Honestly, I'm liking this one. I'm liking this one a lot. I don't know if it'll be my favorite or one of my favorite by the time it ends in terms of this anime season, but I know this one so far is giving a good first impressions, and I'm hoping that it's just going to get better over time. I've heard some great things from source readers, so I'm going to continue to cross my fingers that this anime is going to continue to deliver up to the expectations many have kind of shouted at, like just being like, damn, this is like actually a really good source material, and so far the anime looks like it's carrying on with that, so hopefully they'll just continue to amaze us, especially with how cool the action and magic is already being presented in the anime medium. But thoughts if you have any. What do you think of officially getting introduced to Akari, her ability? Where do you think the plot's going to go? If you have any ideas, of course, if you don't know the source material, leave a like if you enjoyed, and hey, subscribe if you're new around here. Till next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.